Hello, everyone. Welcome to Feedstuffs 365. I'm Sarah Muirhead. Our topic today is that of understanding soybean meal functional compounds and their impact on pig health physiology. Perhaps you saw our article on this topic in the February 2024 digital edition of Feedstuffs. If not, you should check that out, and we've posted a link there in the chat for you to help quickly get to that. Dr. Amy Petry of the University of Missouri is with us today, and she's one of the authors on that February article that I just mentioned and an expert on this topic. She joins us to share her insight and to walk us through what's known about soybean meal functional compounds and their impact on pig health and physiology. Welcome, Dr. Petry. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you so much for having me, Sarah.
Amy, let's start by having you tell us about your background and how you came to co-author this article with Dr. Dean Boyd.
Yeah, absolutely. So I'm an assistant professor at the University of Missouri. I'm a monogastric nutritionist, primarily focused in swine. Our lab here researches influences on energetics in pigs, whether it's related to carbohydrates or reducing maintenance energy requirements through and helping the health and physiology of the animals. And one of those areas that we're interested in is the non-nutritive effects of feedstuffs or the functional aspects of feedstuffs. And so some of my initial research at the beginning of my career was focused in on soybean meal, and that's where I worked with Dean on formulating some of those projects, and have known him throughout my graduate career and now into my career as a professor. And so have worked collaboratively with him and the United Soybean Board to help better understand this unique aspect of soybean meal.
So then what is a functional compound? And is this a term that's new to animal nutrition?
It is. It's derived predominantly from human nutrition. So the concept of a functional food has been around for well over a century in human nutrition. And it's this idea that plants and other foods that humans eat have compounds, largely secondary plant metabolites, things that the plant produces to help protect it in its environment or as antioxidants. That are naturally derived, and when in a human diet or in an animal diet, in this case, are regularly consumed, activate a specific physiological process. And so we term the concept of a functional compound as compounds that are in functional foods that support their functional attributes. And so they're not considered nutrients because they're not required by the animal. There's no deficiency associated with them, but when regularly consumed, they impact a particular physiological process, largely in a beneficial way.
Interesting. Yeah, we all hear a lot about the functional foods and what they're doing for on the human side of things. So now to kind of see this on the pig side of things, that's interesting.
Yeah,
so let's talk. Go ahead.
It's a large driver in the Mediterranean diet, and thinking about the blue zone types of nutrition that's been more frequently discussed probably in the past 10, 15 years in the human nutrition side. A lot of those foods that are consumed in those parts of diets are really rich in these functional compounds.
So then we talk about functional compounds and we talk about soybean meal. What functional compounds are found in soybean meal?
Yeah, so functional soybean meal is full of a diverse amount of functional compounds. In the human nutrition realm, there's at least 14 functional compounds that have been identified. We have to think about those compounds from a different perspective in animal nutrition, because oftentimes objectives relative to health and physiology that are beneficial in human nutrition may not be synergistic to that of animal production. So compounds that might be that might aid in cholesterol reduction or weight management in human nutrition would actually be considered anti-nutrient factors in animal nutrition. However, soybean meal is itself on the beneficial side. About 70% of those functional compounds can have a positive physiological impact when regularly consumed. And we can group those into about 4 different categories that are predominantly represented in soybean meal. And so those 4 compound categories that we have kind of distinctly put together are polyphenols and terpenoids. These are phenolic-based compounds or metabolites derived from phenolic-based compounds. So these include phenolic acids like ferulic acid, cameric acid, salicylic acid, isoflavones, which are probably one of the largely studied ones in swine nutrition, and then terpenoids, which would be your saponins. And then the second category to that would be bioactive peptides. These have a large interest in the human nutrition realm for their immunomodulatory properties and anti-cancer properties. And those would be lunasin and BB inhibitor proteins. And so there's not as much known about them in the animal nutrition realm, but they certainly, based off of what we can derive from human medicine research, have the potential to have an impact on the physiology of the pig. One that's near and dear to my heart and what my lab studies a lot is dietary fiber and oligosaccharides. They're often thought about as an anti-nutrient factor or reduction in nutrient digestibility, but we know that in limited quantities that they have a positive impact on the microbiome. They can have a prebiotic type of mechanism that improves beneficial microbiota that have a positive influence on gastrointestinal and overall systemic health. And so in soybean meal, those move things like stachyose and raffinose that can be prebiotics in older pigs, but also certain fiber compounds like cellulose, reminogalactons, and xyloglucans. And then the last one that we consider, but is less quantity in soybean meal, is functional lipids. And a lot of these are part of the add backs that can be part of soybean meal processing or are found in variable concentrations depending on how much oil has been extracted from the bean meal. And those would be things like phytosterol, such as beta-sitosterol or campersterol, and then phospholipids like phosphatidylcholine, or phosphatidylinositol, both which can improve integrity in the cell membranes and help improve that lipid bilayer that is a big part of a lot of the physiology of the animal.
A lot of different layers there and a lot of
Yes.
different compounds. So when we talk about that, I mean, you listed a number of them, but how do they contribute directly, say, to pig health and physiology? Is there some way you can kind of walk us through that?
Yeah, so this is a growing area of research. And so there's different schools of thoughts of how they potentially can be improving animal health. There was quite a bit of commercial data that came out probably over the last 5 to 8 years that has shown that when we feed higher levels of soybean meal into pigs that are under high antigenic pressure, under disease states, that they perform better to those that have lower soybean meal in the diet. And so we think that there's a potential that some of that difference in growth potential and medical treatments and reduction in mortality that's observed is due to some of these functional compounds, as they have anti-inflammatory effects, anti-microbial effects, and probably the largely studied one would be isoflavones. We know that they can help improve viral clearance, that they have an influence on macrophages in the intestine, that they alter the impact of neutrophils within the immune system, and that they can have antioxidative properties. There's still lots to be known about what their bioavailability is, what their efficacy is in the animal, what concentration is needed to elicit those response, how long do they need to be fed. So it's still a growing science, but there's been really good work that's come out of Ryan Dilger's lab that has shown that. Several commercial studies that have shown the influence of isoflavones when either supplemented alone or are intact as part of the soybean meal. And then work that our lab has shown in nursery pigs that they can improve feed efficiency, and they have an influence on likely the innate immune system response within the gastrointestinal tract.
So then what's next? You have some additional research that's underway to further investigate some of these benefits in commercial swine diets.
We are. So we're doing a large commercial trial and as a collaborative effort to help it look at some of the potential of these functional compounds and try to understand potentially how they're interplaying in the animal over time, both in the grower pig and in the finisher pig, and potentially what some of the metabolism of them are, and then what their anti-inflammatory effects are, what their impact is on the microbiome. Are they being metabolized into secondary metabolites that are then influencing the gastrointestinal tract? Are they decreasing inflammation or markers of inflammation? So we're doing a large biomarker array study in commercial production so that we have that commercial environment that has that high antigenic pressure. So it takes away some of the limited impacts of doing academic studies. And so we're going to the field to collect those studies and then doing a very detailed analysis on the back half to hopefully help understand what the mechanism of some of these compounds are in the field under commercial conditions when we see some of these responses.
Yeah, always important to look at it at the commercial level. I mean, otherwise it really doesn't have that much impact when you're looking. I mean, it does. It's a good starting point at the university level, but let's take that out and do that commercial
Yeah.
study stuff.
So it's a real great opportunity to tie in a lot of the mechanistic work that's been done at the pig level in the very disease model type studies at the very academic setting, and see if we can link those mechanisms to what we observe in biomarker influences in large commercial production. So we're hoping to bridge that gap of that translational work and some of the cell culture work that we see in our own lab to what we see in commercial production.
So as we wrap up, what do you want our listeners to take away from this conversation?
Yeah, I think so. It's a unique science that's growing. It's a little bit diverse and sometimes difficult to wrap our heads around. And so we tried to summarize that, and summarize some of the key articles, both on the human nutrition and animal nutrition side, to help shed some light on the potential aspects of functional foods and how they may apply to animal nutrition. I think one of the big things I'd like people to think about when you think about functional compounds is a lot of it is perspective. Something that may be a functional compound in human nutrition is an anti-nutritive factor in animal nutrition, or vice versa. And so thinking about it in terms of production, we need to think about that those animals still are mounting an immune response. They're still under hygienic pressure. And so some of these functional compounds can potentially have antioxidant effects, can have anti-inflammatory effects that may potentially help support the animal during those states, to allow them to have more energy or more potential to put towards growth. And so there is value in these compounds, but it's a growing science, and that we still have lots to learn relative to what their mechanisms are, what their bioavailability is, how much is needed. And so while it is growing, I think there's certainly some human nutrition evidence and some work in the animal nutrition realm that we can lean on to start building and understanding what their potential role is in animal nutrition.
Very good. Dr. Amy Petry of the University of Missouri. We thank you so much for your time today, Amy.
Thanks for having me, Sarah.
This program has been brought to you by U.S. Soy and is fully funded by the National Soybean Checkoff. We want to remind you to take time to check out that February digital edition of Feedstuffs for the article on this topic and what we've been discussing here today. That link again is posted on your screen. Until next time, for Feedstuffs, I'm Sarah Muirhead.